we started and used this series entitled Digital Cocaine, and we looked at this whole idea that just maybe technology isn't as good as we think it is. I mean, it does a lot of benefit, I get that. It does a lot of good, for sure. But technology, like anything in life, if we overdo it, tends to become a problem. All right? And we've come to realize that a lot of people out there who have all the tech at their disposal are slowly but surely beginning to have their brains rewired by this technology. As with anything that you do in excess and abuse, it begins to affect the way you think and begins to affect the way that you work. Now, that's not the technology's fault. It's not the fault of technology at all, but it's the way we deal with it and the way we use technology that is becoming a problem. And you know what? Where it's manifesting itself in a really big way? You young people. This is where it starts. And if we don't begin to put the right balances into place, then you're going to end up with things in your life that you don't necessarily want to deal with or don't have to deal with. We spoke about the overstimulation of the pleasure center in your brain, that part where the chemical dopamine gets sent to whenever you do something that you find pleasure in, and you get the sense of, wow, that's good, I'm enjoying this, I'm really sort of getting into this. And so what I want to do this morning is I want to have a very careful and a very specific look at a couple of things regarding technology, which for the large part people think is okay, but seems to be a problem for many people. The first of these is this whole idea of multitasking, okay? If you can't read it, it says multitasking because we need another word for unable to focus at the task at hand. All right. Now, I don't know about you, but when you went for your first job interview or a job interview, one of the things that stood you in good stead was the fact that they would ask if you could multitask. In other words, do more than one thing at a time. If you could, well, then you stood a very good chance of getting the work. And once you had the work, well, this was a skill set that would help you to do the work more effectively. Some people will say to you that it's something that really works very well, and other people say it's an experiment that has failed. I'll be dead honest with you, I think it's an experiment that has failed. I'm going to lean towards the failure of this experiment. And classic multitaskers will disagree with me. But think about it before you make up your mind. Okay. The trouble with multitasking is that I believe it is an experiment that has failed because it has failed to deliver the results that it promised. One of the first groups that are beginning to realize this is corporate and businesses, because the day-to-day productivity seems great. But if they had to do a 5-year backward projection of their staff's productivity, most companies will say there's a struggle to maintain the pace. You guys in corporate know this. Your workload is horrific. Surprised you're still alive with the amount of work you've got to get through every day. Is that the way God wants you to live? Or are we perhaps trying to take on too much too quickly? And multitasking says that you need to do more than one thing at one time, all right? In essence, what I'm saying this morning, and the data is beginning to support this. I've done a lot of research into this, and the data is beginning to support the fact that our brains was never designed to do more than one thing at a time. Wasn't. Okay? If you don't believe me, do me a favor, put out your left hand. Okay, and turn it clockwise. Circular, clockwise. Small circles. Okay, now put out your left foot and go anti-clockwise. You can't do it. You know why? Because you're using the same side of your brain, and your same side of the brain is getting two conflicting instructions. You can't do it. It took me 2 hours, and I still couldn't do it this weekend, no matter how hard I tried. No, left, only on the left side. So left clockwise and anti-clockwise. Automatically, whichever is your dominant limb, which is your hand probably, your foot will tend to follow. So watch me. If I'm going to go this way and I want to turn look there, my foot automatically goes the same direction. It doesn't work. Okay? That's just a simple little example of how multitasking doesn't work at all. Now, why can't you do that? Because as amazing as the brain is that God gave you and put in your head, it has limitations to what it can do. And this idea that we function at our level best by doing multiple things at once, I believe is incorrect. Can some people do more than one thing at a time? It seems so. You ladies seem to rock at doing more than one thing at one time. Okay. But I want you to ask yourself a question. Oh, marriage counseling afterwards, guys. All right. Shock. I want to ask yourself a question, ladies, and guys for that matter. You may do multiple things at once, all right? You may be able to do all of this at once. But when it comes to the really important things in life, do you stop everything else and do that thing and make sure you get it right? Or do you still do everything else at the same time? For most of us, all of us in fact, when it comes to the stuff we know we need to get right, we stop everything else around us and we do that one thing to get it right. And that is what the brain was designed to do. Sorry. That was what the brain was designed to do. Okay, and professionals who have studied this whole idea are beginning to realize that multitasking, the idea of multitasking, isn't in fact multitasking at all, but rather your brain switching tasks at an incredible rate. Multitasking isn't multitasking. It's just simply your brain's ability to change from tasks like this at a very, very, very fast rate. And as much as you think you can multitask people, you're not actually multitasking, because multitasking at its purest form says that I need to take this thing and do it 100% correct, concentrate fully on it, and I need to take this thing and I need to do that 100% and concentrate on that, and I'd be able to do this simultaneously. The problem is your brain doesn't work like that. Your brain is changing from this to this at a rate of knots, far faster than we can believe, nanoseconds worth of changing. And what that does is, and what we found out, is that it's beginning to mess with the neurochemistry of people. This whole idea, the brain wasn't designed to work at that rate. It wasn't designed to be changing things like we wanted to do these days. And so what's finding is that the neural pathways in people's brains are beginning to change, are beginning to morph into the idea that I can do more than one thing, or at least I can try to do more than one thing at one time. Mark Gungor from Laugh Your Way fame says that women have the ability to multitask, do more than one thing at a time. And on the surface, it looks as if it is true. But the fact is, and I want you to think about it, if you're sitting with your iPad on your lap, and you've got the phone against your ear and the TV is on, stop what you're doing, and then try and concentrate 100% on all three things at once. You can't do it. The brain was never, ever designed to be able to do that. All right. Now, let me explain this a little bit better to you. Don't stop me if you recognize this behavior. Little Jared is sitting down doing his homework. Could be Connor, it could be Waldo, it could be Ashley, it could be anybody. Could be sitting down doing their homework. Let's say they've got to do maths, okay? Now, because our little spawn has grown up with an incredible ability to expect everything fast. They work very, very fast. They've been hardwired to expect everything immediately. So their drug of choice is instant gratification. So he sits down with his tab, he's going to do his maths homework, and then he gets bored. And so he switches on the tablet to the internet. And he starts doing work on the internet. And while this is happening, he has his earphones in, the iPod is on, he's got his phone on his lap, it's on vibrate so he can sense when there's messages coming in, he's fielding texts, he's listening to music, and he's trying to do his maths homework, and he's on Facebook, and he's on the internet at the same time. At one point from the lounge, he hears his mom go, "Jared, are you still doing your homework?" Oh, I've heard you, don't worry. And he goes, "Yeah, Mom, I'm still busy with it." And then he switches everything off and he goes and does his maths homework. But because he's got the attention span of a gnat, he tends to immediately go back to the internet again. And it's not just Jared, it's Connor. It's everybody, all the young people work like this. When he's finished his homework, his maths, he moves on to history. And this whole concept, and yes, it's a thing, it's called toggling, starts again. So he's got his history open, and he goes to Facebook, the radio's changed songs, he doesn't like it, he changes that. So Waldo is texting Jared picks up his phone, texts him back, he's listening to music, he's doing all of this thing. It's called toggling. And they have learned how to toggle at an incredible rate because they've grown up with the speed that requires. Have you ever seen you know what the most frustrated teenager in the world is? Someone you put into a room with slow Wi-Fi. And you see how tense these kids get very, very quickly because slow Wi-Fi doesn't cut it for them. They need it now. This whole idea of instant gratification, that is why the banks, the financial people are saying that debt will never, ever, ever go backwards. Because they are growing up with the idea that I want it now. They'll go into debt to get it, but they'll get it now. That's why people are struggling today, because we have grown up in this concept that it's my right to have it immediately. I don't have to save for it anymore. I can go into debt to get what I want. The reality is that it's causing absolute havoc in the brain's circuits and in the brain chemistry of the young people. It's changing the original mandate that God placed on our brains when He made us. Let me put this into real terms for you. Any of you IT guys around here? No, at IT. When you get a machine, all right, and if you really know what you're doing, then one of the first things the guys tend to do is they strip the machine down and they go to the CPU and they overclock the CPU. All right? In other words, what they simply do is they speed the CPU's processes up with software. Now, that machine is now running outside of manufacturer specifications. All right? It gets hot. It's going to start warming up because it's doing calculations at twice the speed it was designed to do. The brain is the same way. When we begin to spend this much time inputting technology and everything, we begin to overclock our brains. And it starts running outside of the specifications of the manufacturer. And what happens when a machine is left long enough in an overclocked state? It melts down. It burns out. What happens to a brain when it's continually exposed to this without any sort of guidance to it? It burns out. It burns out. And that's what we're seeing happening right now amongst young people. Burnout isn't something that the 40, 50, 60-year-old in the room is struggling with anymore. It's what the 20-year and the 15-year-old and the 16-year is struggling with right now. It's scary. I mean, this whole technology thing is just a scab that we picked open. But underneath it is so much underlying stuff happening that we have no idea how to deal with it. And neurology has said to us, and they're beginning to understand this too, that when you multitask, you in fact make a lot more mistakes than when you single task. And I sort of get that. You know how we know this? Because if you had to draw a line throughout history for the last 15 years, then according to the predictions, our young people should be geniuses. Because technology was there to speed it up. Tech was there to help us. It was there to guide them to work more efficiently. But if you draw a line throughout the States, throughout the UK, and even in this country, if you draw a line and watch the average grades of the average teenager in school, it's not even static anymore. It's going backwards. We are creating dumber and dumber children right now because of technology. And it was supposed to be something that would help them. If it was up to me, I would remove tabs from school tomorrow. I would. I think it's an exercise that is going sooner or later to fail. Because there's too much going on in the background. The really disturbing thing is that they are beginning to connect technology to things like depression and anxiety. Think about it. How many of you would love to just switch your phone off and leave it off? Most of us would. You know I know this? Because when your phone has been ringing all day long and it rings at one last time that just pushes you over the edge, you roll your eyes so far back you can see the inside of your skull because you've had enough of this thing. It's an overload, a technological overload. I feel like throwing that thing away sometimes. But it's like a drug addict saying, I'm going to go cold turkey. I can't. Everything on that phone is what I am, who I am, how I function. So I can't get rid of this drug, so I have to use more of it. Now, we'll speak about that just now too. Now, the brain is absolutely incredible. I mean, just this little bit of a study, and I am by no means a professional or an expert in this field. I have one, I think, and I use it now and then, I think, all right? But the brain is an absolutely incredible piece of equipment because it has an ability to create what is called a schema. All right. Now, a schema is very, very simple. All a schema is simply is that it is the brain's ability to take information that I read. So I'm reading this right now. It takes this information and it begins to connect it to what I have in my long-term memory. So this is short-term memory, what I'm telling you right now, short-term memory. It begins to connect my short-term memory to the long-term memory. For instance, lust. So I'm talking about lust this morning, okay? And I'm talking about porn, which I will be just now, but I'm talking about this. The short-term memory is getting me to tell you about it. But the long-term memory is telling me that somewhere I read in the Bible that adultery isn't necessarily sleeping with somebody, it's just looking at another woman. That's my long-term memory kicking into play. I'm connecting. It's called a schema. What I'm doing now, I connect to my I'm pulling it back. We pastors seem to do very good at this because God, I think, makes schemas for us, and He connects scriptures. Scriptures we don't even know or don't know well enough. He connects to our long-term memory. So when I'm preaching, often it will happen to me. And I'm going, and Moses, and then in the back of my mind, but you know what? There's a piece of scripture about this. That is the schema being connected in my head. And so I begin to put. Perfect example is, let's use Hollywood royalty, Brad and Angelina Pitt. Okay, when I say Brad and Angelina Pitt, what do you immediately think of? Well, you're such a mom. Lots of kids. Actors. Okay, most of us are going to think, movies. They all make movies. We get that they're good actresses, okay? Now, what the brain does is it takes this idea of movies, Angelina and Brad, and it connects to a schema, something we know about them. So Angie had her breast removed because of something that may or may not have happened, okay? And Brad, well, he was the most awesome Mr. Smith ever, and Angelina was the most awesome Laura Croft ever. So you're being connected to stuff in your long-term memory. Something short-term awakens this feeling. Okay, and this is a schema. Do you understand the schema? Do you understand what I'm explaining it to you? No questions? All right, fine. Okay. And so what it is, the brain simply takes current event and it connects it to your long-term memories that you remember. Done the right way, done the godly manner, and we will begin to remember a lot more. Any of you right now find that you're struggling to remember simple facts? You're battling to remember. I'm not talking about age, okay? I'm just talking about across the board, that you're struggling to recall a face or a name or something. Most of the modern generation right now is struggling with this idea that we cannot remember everything that we're supposed to remember. And I'll tell you why just now. This was such an incredible eye-opener for me. It simply means that we need to take the short-term memory and we have to begin to transfer this from the short to the long-term memory. All right. It's a little like, I've got a bathtub here, okay? And I've got to take this water and put it into this bathtub with a thimble. That's the short-term memory. You take little bits of information and you pour it into the brain. It's fluid, it's constant, it's unbroken. That's the way God designed the brain to work, all right? It's filling this bath with a thimble. Now, the problem is, all of us here right now have at least 2 devices on us right now that has the ability to put information into our lives. So what we've gone from a linear generation, which works information one way in, to a multi-layer or tiered generation, which we have several forms of information coming in all at the same time. You know what happens? That little thimble that we're supposed to take the information from short to long overflows before we get to long term. That is why you can't remember some of the most simple stuff, because you've got to pick it up and it overflows. A lot of that thing falls on the ground and you throw some of it into your long-term memory. And that's where the struggle is for so many people today. In the olden days, information came via books. You were absolutely in control of the information you put into your mind, because when you read a book, you got tired, well, you stopped. You stopped putting info in. When you were refreshed again, you'd pick the book up and you'd continue reading and you'd continue putting information in. In the modern generation right now has an iPhone, an iPad, a computer, emails, SMSing, texting, WhatsApp. Everything is just continually throwing information at us. And the brain is doing the best it can to keep up. And the result is we are losing information the whole time. And you know what happens with that when all this information comes in at once? Ever bought a computer? And after about a year or 2, you find, but yes, this machine's getting slow. You know what you need to do with the machine? Defrag the hard drive. In other words, what defragging means is you take all that information, which over the 2 years has been scattered all over the hard drive, you now need to bring it in and put it into one place for quick recollection. The brain doesn't work like that. You can do it. It takes a long time to reprogram your brain, but it needs to be done. Right now, your brain is what we call scatterbrain. There's info in every nook and cranny. And your brain is struggling to find that information. So when something connects a schema, when my brain wants to connect a schema, and I'm talking about love, my brain goes, okay, that's nice. Now, I know I've got some stuff somewhere stored on love, but quite frankly, I don't know where to find it. It's in there somewhere. When we begin to bring all this together into one area of the brain where it's supposed to go, it becomes easier to pull that information out. As I said, the trouble with the internet age and the digital age is that we have so much information continually being thrown at us. So when Junior is sitting with his tab, and he's got his phone on, and he's listening to music, and the TV is running against the wall, and he's got to study, the chances that all his information is getting to the right parts of the brain is slim to none. It's absolutely slim to none. Used to be back in my school that you used to learn parrot fashion. You used to take the book and just read over and over until it sort of sunk in. And we've always told our kids, don't do parrot fashion. My parents told me never to study parrot fashion. But parrot fashion is coming back because it's the only way these kids can get the information in these days. So unfortunately, we are creating a generation of dumb children because the thing that was supposed to help them has become a problem. I've been watching the last week as we go out, and when I wasn't sick at home, in a restaurant, you walk past a restaurant, 75% of people in restaurants aren't talking. All they do is they sit with their phones and they do this. There's no conversation. It's a dysfunctional, broken society we have created. And we need to begin to see how we can fix this. And the pastor in me sees or recognizes something. We tend to treat God the same way. Let me explain. Think about it. Are you really spending as much time with God as you should? As you could? As you are, possibly? Think about it. Are you talking to God as much as you should? I'm so glad I'm not the only one. Okay, I'm so glad I'm not the only one. Let me explain. When we apply multitasking ability to our lives, all right, then it's safe to assume we do it to our jobs also. Am I right? If we do it to our jobs, then I'm going to assume that we do it to our families too. All right? You don't just multitask in one area of your life. If you think you've got the ability, you're going to do it in every area because it makes life easier. So great. When you wake up in the morning, Monday morning, you're going to get the kids to school. There's extra classes, extra lessons, music lessons, dance classes. There's the visit to the doctor, the psychiatrist. There's youth. There's the church. There's the gym. That's what I got to get through in my daily routine. And the result is that the modern parent today is killing themselves to give their kids everything they didn't have. And so that the kids could do everything they couldn't do. You know what the wonderful thing about all of this is? We're creating burnt out, stressed out teenagers, and we are creating burnt out and stressed out parents. Be honest with me right now. Who of you think your schedule is too busy? Some of you may have balance, but for most people, there's no such thing as balance. If you have kids, there's no such thing as balance. And the same applies to God. God is not the God that we fit in between me opening my eyes and me climbing in the car to go to work. He's not some God I can fit into a microburst relationship where I think if I spend 2 minutes with him, then it's all going to be okay and I've done my duty to God. I've done my obligation. I can go to work now. You know what God is? God is a slow cooker God. God is in a slow cooker. It takes time, this relationship. It takes investment on our part. God is not the thing we fill the gaps in our lives with. The gaps are the things we fill between God. And I know what you're saying to me this morning, but Andre, I'm just too busy. I'm just too busy to do all the things I know I should be doing. Is that so? Because I hope one day I get to heaven and God doesn't say, sorry, I'm just too busy to talk to you right now. Even churchgoers are struggling with this. People who love Jesus aren't putting enough effort and time into what they need to do. This is why towards June of this year, I'm going to start a brand new series entitled Crazy Busy. If digital cocaine is going to bring back eye balance, then Crazy Busy, I hope and pray for you, will bring back balance to the rest of your life. We weren't designed to work at the speed that we are working. We were never designed to think and process information the way we are processing information right now. Another very, very big concern in this world is social video gaming. Parents, listen to what I'm going to tell you right now, okay? If I have to take everything that tech has brought into our lives, the two most dangerous ones of them all is social video gaming and pornography. It is the greatest areas of addiction right now. Cyberbullying is the third most dangerous thing that we can deal with. In fact, cyberbullying in the hands of the uninitiated causes huge problems. Bad, the author of the series, says he went to a seminar in Australia. Apparently everything happens in Australia. He went to a seminar in Australia, and while he was doing the seminar, about halfway through, this one girl just lost it in the audience. So she started shouting and screaming and being disruptive. And he saw something in that. So he said to the helpers, just take her to one side, calm her down, I'll talk to her now. After the seminar, he went and he chatted to her. And he said, what's the problem? Why all this? She says, a couple of weeks ago, me and my cousin had an argument. And I went onto Facebook and I slagged him left, right, and center. Every opportunity, I just broke him down on Facebook. He committed suicide last week. I speak of personal experience when I say that I had to confront a school because of the same nonsense. And the schools are now waking up to the fact that it is a very real danger. In the olden days, you had a big fat kid who used to punch the snot out of you. That was the bully in the playground. Right now, it's far more insidious. It is far more dangerous. It doesn't mess with the physical pain. It messes with the head. A cyberbully will plant words in your mind that sooner or later explode. And when they explode, it involves serious consequences. Don't let anybody ever tell you that words have no power. Anybody who's been on the receiving end of cyberbullying will know what I'm talking about. You see, I don't care how much your kids hate you. But you need to become involved in their life. You need to become a working parent when it comes to the digital devices. I love the statement that is made here. It says, I don't care how much your kids hate you. You need to control their social media. Know what's going on in their social media lives. I promise you they will get over it. But you don't want to reach a stage where your kids don't hate you anymore because they're dead. It's harsh. It's hard. But you know what the statistics currently are for teen suicide? It's massive. It's huge. Next to porn, gaming is the second greatest cause of social upheaval and familial breakdown. You remember I said to you last week, if you spend 2 hours playing a game, it's the same as snorting 2 lines of cocaine. Remember I said that to you last week? To which some parents said, well, maybe I should just cut him down to 1 hour. So it's fine. You let your kids snort 1 line of cocaine then. You understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm trying to say to you here? Understand that I'm a gamer. I love my games. I have for many, many, many years. But it's about content and it's about exposure. This is the key critical thing to remember. As I said to you a little earlier, the end result of multitasking is now seen to be depression. Okay. The end result of video gaming, and I'm talking extensive video gaming, okay, results in aggression. Brad tells a story of a police officer who went out to a phone call. He got called out. The 13-year-old was trying to kill his mom with a knife. He asked her what went on here. She says, no, my husband's overseas. He's extended period, and I'm trying to do everything else. And at dinner time, when I called my son to come and eat, he would say 5 minutes more because he was on the PlayStation. 5 minutes more. And eventually 5 minutes more just became 10 minutes, 15 minutes, until I decided I needed to do something about it. She went into the lounge. She pulled the plug out of the wall. This kid got up to the kitchen, fetched a knife, and chased her until he nearly caught her and nearly wanted to stab her to death. That's a sort of aggression. Now, that is a worst-case scenario. I'm not saying all our kids are like that, okay? But that's a worst-case scenario. I'd love to know how much time this kid really spent on these games for that sort of effect to happen in the brain. As I said, not all your kids will go to this extent, and it really is an extreme sight. But what it does is it shines the light on the fact that gaming affects different kids differently. All right? Some of you kids do it. I do it. We all do it. Do it within the limit, which is fine. Okay. But if your kid is sitting 8, 9, 10 hours a day playing video games, and it's violent games like The Walking Dead, and even some of the more sort of, Call of Duty stuff like that, then there's a problem. You're creating a problem. I said, I'm a gamer. I love my video games. When I was a lot younger, I used to sit up until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning playing games. I don't do it anymore because I can't keep awake, but I don't do it anymore. But I used to tell Bev, that I come back after a couple of hours of playing on the game. It was 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. And when I get into bed and I close my eyes, all I see is images of people dying. All I see is explosions. I see blood and guts and everything. Now, my neural pathways are pretty well set. Let's be real about it. I'm 49 years old. There's not much that can change in this head of mine anymore. But what about your 13-year-old? What about your 14 or 15 or 18-year-old? What's going on in their brain when they're exposed to that level of violence, that level of electronic input for that period of time? But the most dangerous and by far the most insidious of all digital inputs is when we allow pornography into our lives. And I want to show you what porn does to the brain. Okay, first of all, let's all get on the same page about pornography. Understand that the porn industry today is considered to be the greatest growth industry in the world. It's a huge multi-billion-dollar industry, and it is growing daily. All right. The porn industry is in the midst of becoming a legitimate industry. How do we know this? Well, because Sexpo comes around once a year. There's now an official expo for Sexpo, if you want to call it that. And it's one part of it is about sexual health. I get that. But I've seen footage from places like this. And it's all sexual health this side, so Durex will be there, and all these other guys. And on this end, you have all the porn stars. Now, I've got a guy I know who belongs to a church called the Triple X Church. And their mission in life is to go to these expos and evangelize the gospel. I've seen them. I think it was on Carte Blanche. I saw a video of these guys sharing the gospel amongst porn stars. And that's a mission. I mean, that is a calling. But there's a need for it. You know that there are now award shows for porn stars? And the award for the most gratuitous use of moaning in a serious screenplay goes to... And they dress up on the red carpet, and people see the gossip channels will videotape it. When I say dress up, I use that rather liberally because they're very, 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 very little at these shows, okay? But that's it. It's legitimate. The porn industry relies on hooking its staff on drugs so they cannot leave. But the most dangerous fact that I came across in my research is simply this. The porn industry around the world is the biggest user of sex slaves in the world today. A lot of those girls, if you ever logged on to anything like that, a lot of those girls you see up there, they're not there because they want to be there. They're there because they can't leave. And they're as young as our daughters. They're as young as our children. And it's into this background that we find the porn industry has now become a legitimate marital counseling tool. Your secular sexologists, if you want to call them that, are now prescribing porn to help your marriage. That's not the difficult part. The real difficult part is getting the medical aid to pay for it. No, I'm just kidding, okay? But that's it. Your Dr. Eves and whatever her name was, Ruth. Yeah, Dr. Ruth. They're all pro-porn, massively pro-porn. Which is great, when you're in bed with your wife and there's another 4 people on the screen. If we had to try and rate everything I've spoken about over the last 2 weeks, from the least dangerous to the most dangerous, then you've got to understand the top of the heap, the king of the hill, is pornography. Why? Isn't porn just 2 people getting their freak on camera? No, it's not. Porn is deadly because watching porn, okay, is like snorting cocaine. But the consequences of this is what we call a polydrug consequence, and I'll explain to you that in a second. It means taking more than one drug simultaneously. The reason I say porn is the most dangerous of all of these things is because we have studied the consequences, and we cannot, the professionals cannot understand why out of every other addiction in the world, porn has the highest and the fastest hit rate of any other addiction. In other words, what they are saying is that you can become a lifelong porn addict with as little as one single viewing. The second reason why it is so dangerous is because it's free. If you know how to look for it, you can get it for nothing on the internet. You don't have to pay a cent to get all the content you want that your heart desires. You know, it used to be in the old days that you had to log on via dial-up. You kids will know what I'm talking about. Log on via the dial-up, and you had to then download the file, but it used to take hours because this picture would start at the top, and then the first line would appear, and then you'd go make coffee, come back, and then the second line has appeared, and eventually, like 7 hours later, there's this picture of an ugly girl with no clothes on. That's the choice you took, you know. We all did it. Then someone, very clever, designed what we call tube videos today. And what a tube video does is it creates a link to every other porn site in the world. So when you come along and you grab your little paws, you go, what am I going to look for? Teenager plus porn, all right? In your search engine, it goes and it finds everything with the word teenager in it and everything with the word porn. So you get like a multi-billion hit number on your screen of porn with those criteria in it. Now, a tube video is a small file that is easily downloaded. It doesn't take a lot of data, and you can even stream it if your connection is fast enough. So you don't have to pay for it anymore. It's all free. Yet, I think the stats are 42% of all Americans are paying on the internet for pornography. Keep an eye on this website. Since Wayne activated it, 2 minutes ago? Right? $33,000 has been spent on pornography since we switched this website on this morning. That's dollars. Just remember, I'm working in dollars, so multiply that by 15 right now. 593, and it's changing the whole time, have viewed pornography during this period since when he clicked activate to now. Okay. 10,416 have searched for adult teams within this period right now. Okay. Can you scroll up? Every second, 3,000, this is the average right now, $3,075 is spent on pornography. Every second. All right? Okay, 28,000 people are viewing pornography right this very second. That number changes the whole time, but at the specific moment, 28,000 people are watching. 372 people are currently typing into their search engines for porn. Okay, every 39 minutes, a new porn video goes up online. So while we are here in church, 2 new videos have been released. I couldn't get the details from this right now, but in China, 28% porn industry revenues, $27.4 billion. That's China alone, okay? That's enough, and this is what shocked me. That there is enough to feed 62% of our poverty in the world today. Hey, just carry on. $13.3 billion was spent on the porn industry in 2006. That number has doubled probably. US porn revenue exceeds the combined revenues of ABC, CBS, NBC. The latest stats include big corporations like Hewlett-Packard, Apple, all these guys. Take all the entire year's worth of income, and it's still not as big as that number that the porn industry generates. Adult pornography viewer demographics, okay, don't worry too much about this, but if you earn 15,000 K, 6%. 15 to 25 is 6%. And so it just goes up. The approximate salary of a food worker is 13.6% spent on porn, that age. You can work out those distances there. Okay? 2005 was the year we selected. 13,588 hardcore titles. I'm talking about DVDs, okay? DVD cases stacked, which reached 624 feet, which is apparently, I couldn't get the picture, the St. Louis Arch. You know St. Louis, that big arch they have in the States? That's how high it will pile up in just porn. Carry on. This is the shocking stats. Internet porn and kids. 116,000 daily requests for child porn. Okay. All right. 100,000 websites illegally offer child porn. 11 is the first age of internet porn exposure. 1 in 7 youths has received sexual solicitation. Snapchat. Facebook. 1 in 7. Okay. Porn on the web. 4.2 million pornographic websites. 12% of the entire internet is dedicated to porn. Okay. 68 million daily pornographic search engine requests. 34% of the average users receive unwanted pornographic exposure. Ever received an email? It says, click here for a new special deal, and when you open it's just porn. Somehow they got hold of your email address. For 1.5 billion pornographic downloads per month, peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer is finding a website that has only videos and downloading that specific video to your machine. All right. 42.7% internet users view pornography. So almost half of internet workers on porn. 72 million worldwide internet users visit adult sites per month. Do you understand how dangerous this industry actually is for us, for our kids? And I'm not even talking about the spiritual impact that this has on your children's minds. Okay, let me explain this to you. Morgan Bennett, in his article, The New Narcotic, puts it very nicely. He says, cocaine is considered a stimulant that increases the dopamine levels to the brain. Okay? Now that happy place that you got in your head, it increases the dopamine to that. That's cocaine. Dopamine is the primary neurotransmitter that most addictive substances release, causing a high. Remember I said to you last week, it's not the cocaine that puts you on a high. It's not the alcohol. It's the dopamine that is sent to your brain when you're in that position and you want to find a place of pleasure. Okay. All right. Dopamine is the primary neurotransmitter that most addictive substances release. Causes a high and a subsequent craving for a repetition of that high, rather than the subsequent feeling of satisfaction by the way of endorphins. So cocaine takes the dopamine, sends it to the brain, and creates the high, but it doesn't leave you in a satisfied state. Okay? Heroin, on the other hand, is an opiate that has a relaxing effect. Both drugs, cocaine and heroin, trigger a chemical tolerance which requires higher quantities of the drug to be used each time to achieve the same intensity of the effect. So once you've used this much coke and this much heroin, the next time you want to get the same effect, you need to use so much more. All right. That, in essence, is what an addiction is all about. Now, pornography, by both arousing the high effect from dopamine and causing an orgasm, the release effect of the opiates is the type of polydrug that we are talking about. It delivers the brain chemicals in one punch, enhancing its addictive propensity, as well as the power to instigate a pattern of increasing tolerance. Tolerance in pornography's case requires not necessarily greater quantities, this is important, greater quantities of pornography, but rather more novel pornographic content like taboo sexual acts, child porn, sadomasochistic pornography. A little like 50 Shades of Grey. Who's read the book? You're not going to put your hands up, are you? But I know some of you have. Okay. You know that the S&M world, the sadomasochistic world, was a hidden place to most people up until about 5 years ago. 50 Shades of Grey brought it into the foreground. It's acceptable. I've seen pastors' wives read the book. I've seen educated lawyers and doctors reading the book. It's become acceptable. The problem with porn is that you may start off as a curiosity for sex, and I'm talking to these young people. Stay away from even getting curious about it on the internet. The internet is it's a rabid dog without a muzzle. If you play with it, it's going to bite you. And that's my warning to you, all right? You think you can just go in there, have a bit of a curious look around, and one session, it's fine, I can get it. You can't. If you have the smallest addictive personality, it's like taking coke and heroin at the same time. You will go back for more the next time. I'm just telling you what the professionals are saying about pornography right now. It takes as little as one single 2-minute exposure to porn to start a lifelong addiction to this. That is why it is so much more dangerous than coke or heroin or alcoholism or anything else. Because it's a poly drug that delivers both brain chemicals to the same place at the same time. And your system was never designed to handle that imbalance. And that's what an addiction is all about. The really scary thing about this is, ladies and gentlemen, talking to you parents right now, is our kids have these little things. And they go to bed at night with them. They're doing exactly what everybody else is doing. Take it away. You guys may not like me after this, but I'm doing this because I love you guys. And I don't want you to end up where some of us ended up because of this. The abuse of tech by our kids will lead to a reprogramming of their brain. I think we've established that. Now, can you imagine this tech, spending so much time with it, just the technology at school, at work, whatever the case may be, as a youngster your age, and now having to add the fuel, lust-driven picture of porn into that mix too. Can you imagine what that begins to do to their brains? I know of good Christian men and women who have struggled their entire lives with addiction to pornography. And it leads them from the highest of high, where for 1 week they didn't go and look at any porn sites, to the lowest of suicidal depression because they've let God down because they just couldn't maintain the pose and they logged on. They will risk family, life and limb and reputation to go to these sites. Parents, it's time to take back control over your children's spiritual future. Take their phones, take their tablets, check their browsing histories. See what they are looking at. What are their habits? Because little Johnny and little Sue, they're not as little as you think anymore, and they are exposed to stuff that will make your toenails curl if you knew what we've seen. But you know what the Bible, has to say about pornography? Well, it doesn't specifically speak about pornography, because it wasn't existent when it was written. But the Bible does say this about porn. Matthew 5:27-29. You have heard the commandment that says, you must not commit adultery. You must not watch porn. But I say to you, anyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So if your eye, even the good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for the whole body to be thrown into hell. The Bible is very, very, very clear. Porn is a sin. It is a sin. Now, luckily for us, the whole idea of gouging your eye out is metaphorical. You're not supposed to do that, all right? I promise you. But the hell part of this scripture, that's true. Left unchecked, it will lead to everything else in your life that is wrong. Remember, there's nothing that you can do that God cannot forgive. And so maybe today, maybe you need to start the button of grace. If you're in this church this morning and you're struggling with pornography, that button is there for you. God wants you to push that button. I've seen how porn loses its hold over people's life. I've spoken to people who have struggled 30 years with this, and how God, through the Holy Spirit, has healed them of this porn, has removed it from their life in the most biggest way. This is an addiction like any other addiction that can be broken. And I've seen it. You just need to take the first step and admit you've got a problem. Push that big red button of grace in front of you, and God will do the rest. The final thing that I want to talk about this morning is a thing called Adonia. Adonia, simply put, is the sense that you feel nothing. Absolutely nothing. The reward center in your brain, remember that I spoke about that last week? The reward center reaches a point where so much dopamine is being sent at it because of what you're doing, that the brain begins to block the receptor. It begins to build a barrier. And so what happens is you keep throwing more and more and more and more of the stuff that you're doing at this barrier until it bounces over and then gets to the receptor, and you get that sense of feeling again. Okay, but the problem is, if you do this long enough and you do it for an extended period of time, I'm talking sometimes years for some of these addictions, okay, that block becomes so big that the dopamine doesn't get through at all. And the brain, that is the part of the brain that receives the dopamine, goes numb. It dies. Almost in a sense, it doesn't die, it just goes numb. There is no feeling at all. The trouble with this barrier is that it cuts off that feel-good feeling that you get when you're doing. So when you're involved in alcohol, porn, games, social network, whatever the case may be, you realize that once this barrier is up, I need to do more and more and more and more of the same thing to get the same feeling. The brain protects itself, and that feeling absolutely goes away. We don't like it, so we do more of it. And eventually you're just throwing everything you have at this wall, and nothing is getting through. And that is how an addiction is created. Because your brain will build up a tolerance to protect itself from this, but so does your body. Now what anhedonia does is once the brain has built this thing up, it becomes so strong that no dopamine goes through. I'm repeating myself, but you need to hear what I'm telling you right now. Adonia is the key, one of the key components to schizophrenia and depression. That sense of feeling nothing. And more tests are saying, or are beginning to reveal secularly, that it is present in kids as young as your children and my children today. And here's the thing, and this was an eye-opener for me. Your dopamine receptor is the same part of the brain that connects you to God, that gives you the sense that you feel God, that God is with you. When that part of the brain goes numb, your connection to God is broken. He's not absent, but it is broken. And you will struggle. You ask yourself, why are there so many good people in the world today struggling to make any real connection with God right now? Maybe there's something in your life that has created this barrier around that receptor, and nothing is getting through. I was shocked when I read this because I didn't know this. And it makes sense to me why sometimes people who are on the surface are fantastic, amazing, good people just can't find a connection to God. Don't sense Him, don't feel Him, don't know who He is. I'm telling you right now, young people, if you want to drown God out of your life, then overdo it on technology. If you want to drown God out of your life, go for it. Do as much tech as you possibly can. But this is where many, many people find themselves spiritually right now. Now, one of the greatest manifestations of Adonia, or the inability to feel something, is the need for a person who's in full-blown anhedonia to hurt themselves. They begin to hurt themselves. Now, this happens in a number of ways. Okay, they will burn themselves. They'll break their bones. They'll have a wound which they just won't allow to heal. They'll keep picking it until it just bleeds again, and then they'd let it go, and then they'd pick it. But the worst manifestation of all of this is when kids begin cutting themselves. Now, in my right mind, taking a knife to yourself, there's got to be something wrong with you. You don't do that. But you know what the statistics around cutting is? It is huge. In fact, parents, listen to me carefully. There's roughly about 400 sites on the internet which will teach your kid how to cut himself so that you don't know about it. Anhedonia doesn't happen just because of tech usage. There's a whole lot of other reasons. Sexual abuse, divorce, abuse, bullying. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but they are beginning to connect tech use, phones, iPads, to people who have ended up in places where they feel nothing, where they're in a state of anhedonia. When a person reaches this stage where they feel absolutely nothing in the nucleus incumbents, that part of the brain that receives, they will resort to finding a way to feel something. And pain is the way to do that. Now, what happens when a person cuts themselves? When you take a knife and you cut yourself, what happens? Besides that, On a more physiological level, the brain realizes the body is being wounded. So what it does is it floods the systems with a hormone called endorphin to prevent or to numb it, but also to prevent the person from doing. In other words, really, endorphin is Latin for you dumbass, don't do that again, okay? All right? But the brain sends this. But the problem with endorphins is that it's limited. It works for a short period of time, and then it goes away. It's out of your system. So what happens is you have this sense, and most people who've got Adonia, if you ask them, why do you cut yourself? They say, because I feel in control, and I feel at peace. And endorphins does that. The endorphins flood your system. You feel in control. You're absolutely in control of everything. You're at peace. But that feeling doesn't last. It disappears after a couple of minutes. And that leads the person into taking the knife again and say, I love that feeling. Let me do it again. And they cut themselves again. And the endorphins flood back into the system. They feel at peace and in calm. And then 2 minutes later, it's gone. And he picks up the knife and he does it again. And that's why when you see people who've begun to cut themselves, they are scarred here. Normally in the inner part of their arms, but now I've realized that the mommy will take me to a shrink when there's a whole lot of cuts on my shoulder, so I've got to find other ingenious ways. So they cut between their toes, where you don't look. Or they cut in the back of their leg here, or in the thigh, where it's not openly visible. 400 sites will show your kids how to do this. All right? I like your expression because that tells me this is not something you would try. But I've also seen that expression on other kids who ended up doing the same thing. So don't think it cannot happen to you. Never ever think that this cannot happen to you. You need to prevent it at this point from not happening to you. The choices you guys make right now will dictate and shape you for the rest of your life. So I want to say to you again, parents, you need to become more involved with your kids' social media, their device usage, and you need to begin to rein these things in. As I close off now, and I'm going to be finished now in a couple of seconds. As I close off, I want to just give you a number of things that you need to understand very clearly. First of all, moms, you're not going to have any babies, most of you. Not that I'm aware of. But if you're going to have a baby, never, ever, ever, ever put tech in front of your baby. Tech. iPads, phones for them. How many times do you go to the shopping center and you see this, man, he's not even a year old, in the pram? Toddlers, take it away from them. Don't let your toddlers get involved. You know what the problem is? Their brains are mush. It's fluid. Nothing is set. And the minute you begin putting tech and stuff like it into their brains, it begins creating these neural pathways. And those things are set for life. Okay. In an article in the New York Times, and I love this because this is so hypocritical. In an article in the New York Times, Los Altos, California, the chief technology officer of eBay sends his children to a 9-classroom school. Yeah. So do the employees of Silicon Valley giants, Google, Apple, Yahoo, and Hewlett-Packard. But the school's chief teaching tools is anything but high-tech. Pens and paper, knitting needles, and occasionally mud. Not a computer to be found, no screens at all. They are not allowed in the classroom, and the school frowns about the use of in their homes. Question is, why do the chief executives of Apple, Yahoo, Google send their kids to schools that don't use tech? Because they know the dangers of this industry that they are feeding into. They are not concerned about your children, they're concerned about their children. The only thing they want from you is when Steve Jobs or whoever's in charge now release the iPad 5, that daddy and mommy run off to the bank, go get the money, let's give Kitty a new iPad. That's all they're worried about. But they won't put their own kids through this. Steve Jobs in an interview said that he limited his kids from iPads. They don't use iPads at their house because he knew the results. The recommendation is that we begin to limit the use. Guys, listen to me. Limit the use that our kids are on their iPads. Think about it. If your kid goes to a school where they use iPads as an educational tool, how many hours a day does your child spend online? Upward of 5 to 6 hours a day? Do you realize that as much as an hour exposure will overload your adrenal system? We are, for the sake of education, allowing our kids to sit for 5 or 6 hours. And then they come home and they do their homework on the iPad. When that's done, they go to Facebook or they do their games on the iPad. When they're finished with that, they go to the TV and they go watch TV for 2 hours. When that's done, they climb into bed and they play the Xbox until they fall asleep. If it was up to me, I would remove all the devices from all the schools. I would. Hell, we had pen and paper. When you used to do sign and cos and all those things, we had to work it with a little blue book the school gave us and a whole ton of numbers. It was the worst storyline ever, but you knew how to do it. The third thing that you need to know is that we need to begin to train. I'm talking to the parents too, but also to the kids. We need to begin to train our brains to work in a linear fashion. Find one source of input, deal with one source at a time. How many, not all of you, but how many of you sit watching TV with the pad on your lap, playing Heyday or Sugar Crush or all the other nonsense that's out there, watching TV? You do it. Not anymore. No. You say she's cured, yeah, she's redeemed. Hallelujah. Or the iPad or the phone is lying next to you. Mine's always next to me. And every now and then I'll pick it up and I'll see if anybody's messaged me. Woe is me, nobody loves me. And I put the phone down again and I watch TV again. We've been trained. We trained ourselves to deal with multiple forms of input all the time. We need to begin to retrain our brains to start looking at one solid piece of information at a time. The question is, what are we going to do about it? As I said to you, in the brain, behind your eyes, is a place called the prefrontal cortex. This is the area that deals with consequence and cause and effect. And it is not developed until your mid-20s. That's why some of our greatest hits happen before 25. Okay? Some of the most stupid things we did before 25 because we just didn't know any better. We knew better, but we thought we couldn't die. We were absolutely invincible. And it's because of this prefrontal cortex, parents, listen to me, because of this prefrontal cortex in your head right now, that your kids, their age, will not see the danger of the tech they have in their hands. And they are going to argue with you. They are going to debate with you why you shouldn't take this stuff away. They are going to have little dolls of me at home, and they're going to be putting pins into it because I really messed up your life, but I don't care. All right? The danger is real. The danger is real. And you parents, you best start acting like parents. That's my fourth point. Don't be their friend. Be their parent. Too many parents are trying to be their kids' friends. But when it comes to the really tough decisions you have to make around parenthood, you can't do it as a friend. You need to do it as a parent. The situation is serious. It's dire. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard, but it is not impossible. Remember, you have a big red button, God's grace before you. Push it and start this afternoon by beginning to limit your child's exposure to the stuff. If the Pandora's box of gaming hasn't been opened in your house, then begin to limit their access to it. Begin the journey back to a linear style of working. Again, there's nothing wrong with any device or any time spent on a device, but it means you, the parent, need to put controls back into place. Begin getting that wonderful child that God gave you, that wonderful son or daughter, begin pulling them back from the abyss that is filled with ones and zeros. A few suggestions and I'll be finishing off. First of all, people, remove all technology from their bedrooms. Everything. They go to bed at night, there mustn't be a phone in that room. There mustn't be an iPad in that room. There must not be an Xbox console or a TV in that room. No music while studying. And a lot of people are going to argue with me, but it helps me concentrate, blah, 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 blah. Multiple forms of input while you're trying to study. I can't do it, and I don't know how you can do it if you think you can do it, but there is a subset theory that says music while studying in Connor School, for instance, some of the teachers allow it. Now, I don't know if I'm happy with it. I don't know about Maragon. Do they allow it when you're in class? Some of the teachers, you see, it happens in all the schools, okay? But studying and music at the same time doesn't work, okay? I struggle to breathe and not do anything. So, I mean, can you imagine? Consider if your child is able to handle a smartphone, okay? Maybe a normal Nokia 3110 with the aerial that you pulled out is the safe option. You remember those phones? There's no smart function, no smart facilities, nothing. It's a phone. If your kid can handle the technology, fine. But keep limiting. But if he can't, if you think there's an addictive personality there, rip it away. Give him an old phone. Okay. Limit digital access to about an hour a day. Anything more than that overloads the adrenal system. How many of you kids sleep longer than 9.5 hours? That's awesome. No, that's awesome. That's one of the things. Your teenager needs at least 9.25 hours a night sleep. That includes school, okay. You're so my man, you're so my boy. Okay. And then if you really want me to hate you, you to hate me right now, parents, turn the tech off 2 hours before bedtime. I know what your kid's saying, but more, my Bible is on my iPad. Are you going to use? No, but it's on my iPad. 2 hours before they go to sleep, it gives the brain chance to deflate, to settle down. But if he goes to bed after spending another hour playing Candy Crush or whatever these things are on these iPads or what Clash of Clans, it messes with their heads. Whether you believe me or not, it begins to mess with their heads. Stop pointing fingers at each other. Okay. And lastly, let's go all old school with our kids. Start reading books. Not Kindle, books. You know those things with paper? All right, those are the things. And I want to leave you with this, and this is the last bit I'm going to say. Sorry, I'm going to be over time, but I think this is important. One last thing. Think about it. That passion that you have for that Xbox controller. Okay. That passion you have for your phone or your iPad. That passion you have for your tech usage. Do you know what happens when you do all of that? Besides everything I've spoken about, Jesus looks down and his only regret is he says, I wish you had the same passion for me that you have for your devices. Keep that in mind. I think of everything I've spoken to you over the last 2 weeks, keep that in mind. Jesus is saying, I just wish you would put as much effort into me as you do into your iLife. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you this morning for the series. I just thank you for giving us this information and helping us to deal with everything that is being thrown at us right now. Father, I just pray that you will guide us, and I pray that you will, as parents and even as grandparents and as family, Lord, that we will begin to put into place the guides for us to bring our kids back to you, to cut back on tech and just to go back to a place of devotion to you and reading your word and praying to you. I pray for courage and strength for every parent in this place who has to begin to do this. It's not going to be easy and it won't be popular, but Father, our kids are that important to us that we want to get them into the right frame of mind. Give us the strength and the wisdom to do that. But Father, give us the foresight to follow through with the decisions we make. Lord, we come before you. We ask for your forgiveness. We ask for your grace. We ask for your mercy. We ask, Father, that you will bless us. We pray this all in your holy and wonderful name. Amen.